Clearly, that was a strong love for the game there. Because I do want you to speak to this because we have, young folks that listen to the podcast, um, who got hoop dreams, but their hoop dreams, like you said, might not be the traditional way. They may not get the scholarship. They get to walk on. Can you talk a little bit about that experience going to Iona and walking on and,
Yeah.
expectations, things of that nature?
Yeah. So, like I said, I was a very average to slightly above average high school basketball player. I played JV as a sophomore. I played varsity as a junior. Probably averaged like 10 to 14 points, 4 to 6 assists, 4 to 6 rebounds. Like I was not killing it in high school. Like I was doing fine. Like I had some 20-point games, but I was not like the man, you know? Um, but the one thing that I had kind of figured out is that I knew how to play basketball with people who were better than me. And so
Interesting.
for me, I was able to, because I was never the man. I always kind of had to be like somebody who could help make people better, right? And so when I got to Iona, and if you're the 12th or 13th man on the bench, no one's looking for you to be the guy who's going to come in and be able to get by their man off the dribble and be the guy to like get a lot of buckets, right? They're looking at the end of the bench as like, are you capable of making the 12 guys ahead of you play better? Right. And I see it sometimes with kids now. If your best impact on the court can only happen if you have the ball in your hands, right? I call it being ball activated. If you only have an impact when you're ball activated, your career is going to max out. Whereas if you can do things without the ball and make other people better, your career can max out when you're the like 11th or 12th man on the team. And so I think for kids with those hoop dreams, as someone who had definitely a non-special high school career, you don't have to be necessarily the man to make other people better. And if you can make other people better, your career might last longer than you think. And then two, I've been thinking about basketball now in terms of quarters, right? If I started playing for real when I was 10, right? And I stopped playing for a school team right when I left Iona. At the time, I thought that was my career, right, in basketball. But now I'm realizing, oh, that's just the first quarter, right? Like, so 10 to 20 were quarter one, 20 to 30 was the first half, 30 to 40 is um, third quarter, right? And now I'm 41. My kids are 11 and 12. And I'm saying, okay, 40 to 50, that's fourth quarter. Anything I do on the basketball court after 50 is overtime. Right. Obviously it's different from when you're younger and like you have a lot of expectations on what you're supposed to be doing in the game because you put this effort into it or whatnot. But yeah, so now I'm in the fourth quarter and just enjoying basketball in a new way. And I would say for young people too, is just be open to the idea that your basketball career is longer than you might think.
I'm actually so glad you said that because Agee talks about this all the time, having this love for the game. But I think sometimes people misinterpret what he's talking about. Yes, obviously he's saying, hey, you got to be in it your whole heart, go for it. But he's also saying, but if you got a true love for the game, you got a true desire for the game, it's the game as a whole, not just on the court. It's the things you can do off the court. It's the things you can,
Yeah.
like you were saying, you don't always have to have the ball in your hand. You know, it's, you know, accepting, can I make the guys ahead of me better? Like sometimes I'm thinking like, I don't know if the average person can do that in life.
Uh-huh.
Can I make this person at my job better at what they do? So, and I think we're supposed to get some of these life lessons in sports. I think sometimes we miss it, but what we want to move into is just, man, we really want to jump into, how did Project Backboard come about?
Just to touch on your last point, like I think the idea of loving basketball, like love it not just as a spectator, right? Love it as a participant. And like that can be playing, right? But it could also be like picking up trash at a court. It can also be changing nets. And I think like figuring out that, love is sort of like when you love something, you got to give something to it. It's not just watching it. And so for young people, you can love game, NBA, you can love basketball, watching basketball, but it's not really love unless you're giving of yourself in some way. And so with Project Backboard, the origin of it was I was working in community relations with the Memphis Grizzlies. And I was working at a time when they had a lot of guys who were really active in the Memphis community. You know, Tony Allen, Zach Randolph, Marcus All, Mike Conley, especially. Um, and so, like, seeing a lot of the give back those guys were doing, and then also, like, when the team wanted to do things like renovate basketball courts, I had always experienced basketball as a player and something that happened like, on a court, right? But being around those guys and in that role, I kind of started to see, oh, it is bigger, right? It's not just what happens when I step onto these lines. And so what I noticed though was in the different places in Memphis I was going to for some of these events with some of the guys, a lot of the public parks didn't have game lines on them. So basically like just playing in someone's driveway. And from someone who grew up practicing my free throws outdoors and playing outdoors all the time, I was like, well, this is crazy. Like, if I'm a kid and the community center's jam, how am I going to actually get better without game lines? So the origin of Project Backboard was in my free time, non-Grizzlies time, I started painting the free throws and the 3-point lines on public park courts that didn't have any of them, thinking about when I was 15 and 16 and all the time I was putting in public parks. What happened then was I went to a court that had these shade sculptures next to the court. So I went to the guy who designed the big colorful sculpture, like, hey, what color should the key and the game lines be? And he came up with something funky for the whole surface. A guy named Anthony Lee, an artist in Memphis. And it's like, well, like, all right, like, I guess we'll try that. I asked, right? So it's like, when you ask, you gotta follow through. Um, and it just like totally changed the vibe of the space, and just like the energy was totally different. And it's like, oh, like we should do that again, um, and try to like bring color, see if this works in other places. Again, thinking about Memphis, like being a place where the park life's not the same as New York or Chicago. So like what is going to get people excited to be out in public parks together and maybe be hooping together. And so that was kind of the genesis, was, having an artist kind of come up with the idea and then me seeing it and thinking like, oh, like I got to copy that and see if we can do it elsewhere, and then kind of growing from there. And then, yeah, I don't know if you remember, but we had actually met, and I think it's the way we got connected initially before we started talking about Project Backboard. This is before Project Backboard even started. Um, you guys were both at a screening of Hoop Dreams at the Memphis Film Festival, um, and Kevin Cooliow was there with me. We went out to take some photos on a court that I had renovated while I was still with the Grizzlies. And so I think we met from that, and then um, fast forward 9 years, almost 10 years, we finally got Garfield Park done.